Richardson. Step back. Crossover. Down the lane. Oh! Hanging in the loop. Queen wants to dance with Wolf. Baseline. That was saucy. Luis Bailey punishing the rim.
Looks like a bona fide top 3 pick in this upcoming NBA draft.
Always great to get one more look at now former Big Ten stars set to take the next step. Welcome into Big Ten Today, fueled by Gatorade, Rick Pizzo, Andy Katz. And before they take that next step and officially get drafted, they travel here to Chicago each year for the NBA Combine. You cover this Combine each and every year. It changes, obviously, with players and personalities, but everybody's looking for the same result, and that's to try to impress all the coaches, GMs, and scouts in attendance.
And a lot of interviews take place this week with every team. And what I love the last couple of years is they've sort of made the top players come here for the lottery night just to watch it and then do the interviews and go through at least the measurements, which has been very interesting in the last couple of days with some of our Big Ten players who have measured a little shorter than they were listed. But one thing that's interesting is that while the Big Ten did not get a team in the Final Four this year, they're going to win the draft night because the Big Ten is going to be littering all throughout the lottery and the first round with a number of players that really blossomed throughout the course of the season that might not have been first-round picks at the beginning.
I think the Dallas Mavericks maybe win draft night.
Yes.
No matter whether you agree or disagree with conspiracy theory, I don't think that is up for debate. You brought up players who maybe surprised us or perhaps will help the Big Ten own draft night, and that is where we start our big story. As you look at the Combine invitees this year here in Chicago from the Big Ten, we'll dive into a bunch of these names. I know you and Dave Revson spoke about some of these players on Tuesday, but I want to start with one of the names there in the middle because it was one of the surprising moves inside the Big Ten this year, and the move from Jace Richardson being what was considered a good player at Michigan State to suddenly being projected as a potential lottery pick in the draft.
Yeah, and what Jace did show, we talked about this on Monday, I had a chance to sit down with him, was that he sort of had a traditional freshman year where early on wasn't expected to be, a star. He was a little bit overshadowed by, it was projected to be Jaden Akins, obviously, and Fears was coming back, Trey Holloman. And then as the season progressed, even though Michigan State started to go on a little bit of a win streak after November, the keys were handed to Jace Richardson. He took them, and his game ascended. And the NBA saw that he was a player that could create on his own, meet the moment. The only knock on him this week right now is his height. He was listed a little higher than 6 feet, but he checks in at 6 feet, and he's a combo guard. Now, he has played point guard before, but what will he be in the NBA? Will he be a 1? Can he be a 2? Is he just a tweener and he'll just make his way? We'll have to wait and see.
And sometimes there are just guys who figure it out, right? He has the pedigree, obviously, with the legacy as well, having a father that played very successfully in the NBA. This kind of stuff does matter when it comes to draft night for coaches and GMs. They want to try to find as sure a pick as possible, and maybe at 6 feet, he's not a sure thing, but he sure showed us last year that he can play at any height.
And I will say this, look, he's better than Bronny James. So I'm not saying nepotism, but nepotism is there. They obviously know the family. They know that his father had a very good college, obviously, an NBA career. He knows people. Tom Izzo knows people. I think it will help Jace Richardson get in the door to certain picks within the first round. But in interviewing him this year, spending more time again, he's high character. He gets it. He grew up in a professional basketball family. He's been around the game since he could walk. So, I think he'll be fine.
All right, let's move just down the road to Ann Arbor on the opposite end of the height spectrum.
Yes.
You had the 2 7-footers that Dusty May used so well this year, played them more together than anyone expected. Danny Wolf had a ton of success in his pre-Michigan career at Yale. He had won a ton of games. He comes over to Michigan, and I think he showed that even against better competition, when he had his best games, and I think consistency will be the question for Wolf, he was a guy that was just an absolute mismatch nightmare for opposing defenses.
Well, he also kind of corrected me because to your point, I kind of forgot that he struggled at the beginning at Yale.
Yeah.
That it was not he was not some sort of can't-miss player. Maybe that's why he originally, I mean, obviously great institution, but I mean, that's why he went to Yale. He was not as highly recruited. He didn't score a lot. He had to sort of wait his turn. He had a great year 2 years ago when they ended up beating Auburn in the first round in the NCAA tournament. And then this year, he said he came in, wasn't sure how it would work with Vlad Golden, to play with someone like that and to play off of and have a 4 and a 5 be on the court and have that high-low and have it work so effectively. And he said early on he kind of attributed some of those turnovers to that because he was playing a little bit out of position for himself. And, he's hoping that he has corrected and made better decisions. I thought he also looked bigger in terms of stronger in the last month or so since we last saw him during a college basketball game. But he's also another player that the NBA can see growth because there's been pretty significant growth in his game over the last 2 years.
And you look at him and you think, point forward at 7 feet, that he can carry the ball up the court. He's got a really good handle for his size. He
plays a very Euro game, which is
what the
NBA
NBA
right
is looking for right now. Perhaps 10 or 15 years ago, it's a different situation. Right now, he is a coveted commodity, which leads us to his teammate, who you just mentioned in Vlad Golden, a more traditional big, a guy who's going to live down in the paint, who doesn't like to shoot 15 to 18-footers. And yet his production, whether it was FAU or at Michigan, even when opposing defenses know you have to wall up and shut down this guy, they weren't really able to do so. So how does he project?
So I watched him work out yesterday, and, he was shooting some threes, I think, just to show that he can. But, look, he is who he is. I mean, he's a big man that's going to be more traditionally in the post. Look, he's not as good as Zach Edey, but there was that sort of criticism of Zach Edey a year ago. Oh, he's an old school big. Is he going to work in the NBA? But as you see on these highlights, Golden can run the floor. He can move his feet. He can defend in the pick and roll. And so it's just going to be a matter of just need one team to like him. I think he's probably in the sort of 25 to 45 range. What does that mean? It sort of depends who falls. Does he fall to the top of the second round? Possibly, but I think he'll get a guaranteed deal if he does.
Yeah, and I think he's also a fit pick. You have to go to the right team.
Yes.
There are teams where Vlad Golden's just not going to fit into the way that they run their offense, and so he has to find a spot where they want to go through that 5-man a little bit. Otherwise, you don't waste a first or a second round pick on a player who's likely going to sit on your bench. Upside has been a buzzword, right, for the NBA draft for a long time, and I think it applies to Illinois' Will Riley. He has a ton of upside. But we haven't really seen, because that wasn't the situation. He hasn't developed to the point where he was a guy that could be used for 35, 38 minutes a game. Now, Brad Underwood used him a lot more late in the year, and we did get to see him develop. Is he one of those guys who could potentially, especially this week at the Combine, jump up spot after spot? Because physically, he is going to jump off the board.
Yeah, I mean, the comparison, again, these are not who he is now, but sort of a Shai Alexander, sort of that kind of guy.
I like you couching. Yes. I am not saying he's going to be SGA.
That kind of game. He's lean, he can sort of work the angles, he can put the ball on the floor, he's got range. But it's interesting, Riley had a great early start against sort of inferior competition. Then he gets into the Big Ten. He's scouted really well. It's more physical. He struggled in the middle of the season and then started to ascend again as they made their postseason push. And also, he's not overseas, but he plays in Canada. And so he has some international basketball experience. And Canadian basketball is on the rise. They're going to be a force, I think, in 2028. And he's a part of that program. And that also is certainly enticing to NBA personnel.
And he's a young man.
Yes.
NBA likes youth. From a young man to a grown blank man in Wisconsin's John Tonje, who physically looks the part, who's been around college basketball a long time. We saw him blow up in the Big Ten tournament and just take that tournament over until the championship game. What do you think NBA teams see when they look at Tonje?
Well, first of all, it was great for him, obviously, to show he could come back from an injury. He was hurt at Missouri, comes back. He's an all-Big Ten player at Wisconsin, a big-time scorer. I think for him, it's going to be an issue when he goes to the workouts and talking to NBA personnel of how does he defend? Does he move his feet well enough? He can score. That's not a problem for him. It's whether or not he can defend at a high level. That's whether or not he's going to get on the floor. But I do think he's similar with Golden. He's a 25 to 45 guy, potentially late first, or if he's high second, I think he'll get a guaranteed deal.
You know, I'll say this as well. I've asked Greg Gard about John Tonje multiple times over the past 12 months, and the first thing that Greg referred to was never his production or his scoring ability. What a great teammate and a locker room guy he is. And that matters as well, especially when you get into the second round, perhaps, and teams are trying to debate between one player or the other. Does one have character issues? Is one a can't-miss guy in terms of character? That could certainly help John Tonje. I think it could also help a guy like Bryce Williams, who to me is fascinating because I'm not sure how or where he fits. And yet, all he did during his time at Nebraska was produce, especially when the Huskers needed him the most.
Yeah, he feels like a guy that was not talked about as much. We see these players in the NBA all the time that end up having really good NBA careers that maybe weren't headline names in college, even though he was highly productive for Nebraska, obviously was a major piece of their crown championship, getting the NCAA tournament the year before. He's a scorer. He's a baller. That's what he is. I mean, he's just going to make himself known on the court, and NBA teams like that. There's no question in my mind he's going to get drafted, and similar to Tonje, I keep hearing him late first, early second, a player that's going to get a guaranteed deal. You see his athleticism right there. He can run the floor, he can flush, pretty good defender, gets out on the break. So he's just a player I think is just going to find a way onto the court.
Yeah, just like he found a way to score at more than 20 points per game. And give him a ton of credit. He was the leader of that team that saw its regular season and its NCAA tournament hopes come to a crashing halt when they lost to Iowa. Yet Fred Hoiberg sat there and said, I think we can succeed in the postseason wherever it is because I have guys like this. And Bryce Williams put that team on his back with some help from Juwan Gary and others to get them that crown championship. Before we wrap, Yannick Conan Niederhauser, a guy who before the year started at Penn State, we weren't talking about at all, Andy, not just about NBA prospects, but about a guy who would be impactful when he was in college at Penn State. He really opened our eyes.
Yeah, and he was hurt at the end, which, part of all the injuries that Penn State had. They were not a team that you would have thought would have missed the Big Ten tournament. But he's a player certainly on the rise, played really well on the weekend in their G League combine. So did Mackenzie Mbako. That's how they both got to the regular combine. But look, he's got great size, reach, can defend, block shots. I mean, again, he's another player that I think is going to be on the rise on the draft boards somewhere probably in that second round.
Yeah, because he's not talked about a lot, but he's a big kid. He's more athletic than you would think for his size, and he's a really good defender.
And also international. They love the international players.
Andy apparently wants to hop on a plane to go across the international date line, but we're not going to let him do that because he's coming back a little bit. Opens up at home against UC Santa Barbara. And we welcome in UCLA slugger Jordan Woolery as today's big interview. Jordan, first and foremost, thanks for being with us. And I understand just a few moments ago we learned that you are one of 10 finalists for USA Softball's Player of the Year honor. What does that mean to you?
It's super awesome. I found out just literally 2 minutes ago, too, so I'm super grateful. It's such a really awesome list to be on, and I'm grateful to be surrounded by so many awesome players, too.
I know we won't know the winner for a little while, and you have games to play beforehand, including the regional this weekend. You open against UCSB. What's the vibe right now surrounding this team as you head into the NCAAs?
Yeah, just good vibes, honestly. We're really excited to play and get out there. This is our first week off we've had since we started the season without any midweeks, so we're grateful for the rest and excited to get after it on Friday.
Came off a pretty good run in the program's first ever trip to the Big Ten tournament as a member of this conference, made it all the way to the championship game. What was that run like for you guys?
Yeah, it was super cool. Of course, we wanted to kind of close it out at the end on Saturday, but I think we kind of left our mark on the Big Ten in this first season, and we're excited to take that momentum we had into the regional this weekend, too.
I want to look back, Jordan, on a couple of those games specifically. Starting the quarterfinals, one of the best games of the entire tournament against Indiana. You head into the seventh, and I know the game is tied, but you guys had to feel so comfortable with you and Megan, the heart of that lineup, coming up, and you started off that game-winning rally with the single to get everything going in the bottom of the inning. Do you recall what you were thinking and what your approach was as you took the plate for that specific at-bat?
Yeah, honestly, I wasn't too worried because Megan's behind me. I feel like it makes my job really easy, like a lot less pressure on me. So just focusing on being in the moment and knowing Megan's going to have my back no matter what, I feel really grateful to have her behind me. So in those moments, I don't feel too much pressure because of Megan right there.
Yeah, and I know when I spoke with Megan a couple of weeks ago, I learned how close that you guys are. You share that Splash Bros moniker as big Golden State Warrior fans of Steph Curry and all the guys who have done such great work with the Warriors. What is that relationship like between you and Megan, and how much do you really feed off each other?
Yeah, it's super special. I mean, before I go up to bat, each time I look at Megan and say, I got you, and we like hit our bats together. So I think it's just like this unspoken, but also kind of spoken to, like, bond that we have each other no matter what. And even off the field too, we're super close. So I feel like our relationship has just flourished, especially this year too. Obviously,
those relationships are super important, as is your relationship with your coach. And, of course, your head coach is one of the greatest players, one of the greatest coaches in the history of this sport. So how do you kind of measure the influence of Coach I on you, on everybody on this team, and really on this entire program?
Yeah, I mean, she's been here literally forever, and her and Coach Lisa have really held it down in the last, like, 30 years, I think, honestly, them being here. So we're just really grateful to have two such strong coaches, and I feel like especially Coach Lisa this year, too. She's had a lot of influence on the offense. Coach I's more in the bullpen now, but I think we're just really grateful to have them and have our backs all year long.
All right, so let's go back now to the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament, because in that game, now you and Savannah Pollock combined for 5 hits, but it was actually the bottom of the lineup. You had Bragg and Mujica each going deep with huge home runs off Jordy Ball, who had just recently been named the Big Ten Pitcher of the Year. I think it speaks to the depth of your lineup. How much confidence do you guys have 1 through 9 that no matter who is at the dish and no matter who's in the circle, that you guys can get it done?
Yeah, I think it's really awesome to see the freshmen come through in such big moments like that. I feel like they've been prepared for it all year long, and I think it's just a great opportunity for them to just show who they are and, like, finally let the world know who they are. I feel like the last few games have been kind of reliant on them too, honestly. So it's really cool to see them come through and have some outcome. It was awesome.
All right, as I mentioned at the start of the interview, you open NCAA regional play, and you are the host. You have UCSB, Santa Barbara, on tap for Friday night. What's the early scouting report? Obviously, a lot of Big Ten fans that watch you don't know much about UCSB's program. What can you tell us?
Yeah, just going to be always a good game per usual. I think regionals brings out the best in everyone, so it's going to be a good game, and everyone come out to Easton for sure this Friday.
Now, you also have San Diego State and Arizona State in that quadrant. So for you guys to get where you want to be, at least to be playing next weekend in the Supers, what has to happen?
Yeah, just play Bruins softball. I think not worrying too much about the opponent. Obviously, we have a scouting report going and focusing on the pitchers when what they throw this weekend, but just playing UCLA softball and just being our best when our best is needed.
How do you take the pressure off yourself when you're in a situation like this? You're at home, you're the favorites, everybody is expecting you to move on to the Supers next weekend, but you don't want to put that kind of pressure on yourself. So how do you avoid doing exactly that?
Yeah, just worrying about one game at a time, one inning at a time, one pitch at a time. Honestly, I feel like that's where we're at our best. We're not looking too far forward, but just being where our feet are.
All right, Jordan, I want to know who's the loudest talker? Who's the person in your locker room or in your pregame huddle? Who gets you guys fired up and ready to go in big moments like you'll have this weekend?
I think Coach Lisa, honestly, and then like within the team, I would say probably Lefty or Tins. They kind of get us going. Tins, our pitcher, she's so fired up all the time, and I think she brings such a great energy, and she just gets us going when we need it.
All right, well, let's finish there because I wanted to talk about that pitching staff as well. Most teams have one, maybe two aces that they can really rely on inside the circle. You guys have 3 pitchers who would be considered the aces on most teams. How dangerous does that make you from a pitching standpoint? And how much does it help you guys as hitters to face them as often as you do during practice?
Yeah, I think we have the hardest challenge of facing them during the middle of the week when we have to hit off them. I think it makes us so much better as hitters. And also I think it's really hard for other teams to kind of get used to a flow. We have 2 really good up pitchers. Then we have Fish, who's throwing a down ball, and KT, obviously lefty too. So I think they all bring such different looks, and it's kind of hard to get a flow going off them.
A remarkably well-rounded team. That's why UCLA and Jordan Woolery have a chance for a 50th win of the season this weekend against UCSB. Certainly hoping it won't be their last. Got to win 3 this weekend to get to Supers. That is the next step on their journey. Jordan, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Good luck to you and the team this coming weekend during NCAA Regionals.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I think the Windermere Cup is a secret weapon as far as preparation for the conference championship.
It's almost like a championship atmosphere without being a championship.
To be able to face off against an international team just 2 weeks before we go and square off against the rest of the Big Ten, it is the perfect situation for us to really sharpen all of the edges before we go.
It really helps you stay super competitive. You're competing against obviously great crews. There's a lot going on at Windermere, and when you get to Big Tens and then NCAAs, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of pressure. So being able to handle stressful conditions is really important.
We had Wisconsin come out last year, and Indiana came to the Windermere Cup this year. I think it's just incredibly special to be able to share this event with them.
Being in a new conference this year is super exciting, and it's so awesome that we get to see them in a race like Windermere Cup before our conference championships. Going into the Big Ten championships and NCAAs, we're just going to have to find a new level, and that's going to be helped by Indiana and New Zealand being here for the Windermere Cup.
You get to practice the pressure. Your parents are here, your family's here, your friends are here. There's a lot of attention on you, so it prepares you to elevate to the next highest level.
Our Gatorade Game Leaders takes a look at the incredible dominance of the Washington women's rowing program. 5-time NCAA champions, 15-time conference champions, and we're not just doing this at the collegiate level. The University of Washington has sent at least one rower to every single Olympics since 1980. And we are thrilled to welcome in women's rowing coach Yasmin Farooq to the show. Coach, we just showed some of our viewers a small snippet of what the Windermere Cup is all about, but we'd love it if you could expand on that a little bit. How impactful is that event, not just to your program, but to rowing as a whole?
Oh my gosh, the Windermere Cup is one of the spectacle events in the world in rowing. You've got the Olympics, you've got the World Championships, you've got the boat race, Oxford and Cambridge, and you've got the Henley Royal Regatta, and you got Windermere. So Windermere attracts an international team. We want to race against the best. The Seattle community said that's what they wanted. They wanted to see the dogs have to square off against someone that was really going to push our level. And the timing is just perfect because it's right before the Pac-12. Well, it used to be the Pac-12 championships for us, and now it's the Big Ten because this is our first one, and here we go. It was super awesome to have Indiana here, and we will see them again in the heats on Saturday.
And we'll get to those Big Ten championships in just a bit, but you said this is what Seattle wanted. And for those who are uninitiated, to see the rowing community and the fans that show up, you called Seattle in at least one occasion, and probably more often than that, Rowtown, USA. So describe to me what it's like on Montlake Cut when you're rowing the Windermere and you look to the side and the athletes get to see the turnout that is watching them perform.
It truly is like rowing in a stadium. You've got the greatest setting literally right behind the cut. And everyone knows why it's called that. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful settings in sports. And the cut is truly, you have over 5,000 people lining both sides and then on top of the Montlake Bridge. So as the rowers enter the cut, it's just purple and gold all over the place. Husky Nation, fully behind us. And then when you hit the last 250 meters, that final 1 minute sprint, the whole crowd is above you on the Montlake Bridge as well. So you truly are just surrounded by Husky fans.
And they got exactly what they wanted because every single boat won their respective races during this year's event. And this after a stretch, Yaz, in which your team was rowing multiple weeks in a row. So how impressed were you by the effort that you saw?
Man, that third weekend of racing in a row can be really hard, but we prepared for it. And, one of the things with moving to the Big Ten was that we knew we had to field 7 boats deep. It's the biggest conference championship, and we knew we had to be a deeper squad. So we raced 7 8s and 3 4s at the Windermere Cup, and I just feel like it was outstanding preparation, and I'm super excited about going into the championship this weekend.
So as that preparation has been done and you make the transition to your first ever Big Ten Conference Championship, what's the approach and the focus heading into this weekend?
Well, the Big Ten championship is the gateway to the NCAAs, and the team that wins it gets the automatic qualification spot. So that's what we're thinking about. Number one is to qualify, get that spot, and it's a point system. So we've got 7 events to score, and if we can get the highest number of points, then we will be able to secure that spot. And I say that respectfully because I think we're going to have some excellent competition. Rutgers is doing a really good job, and Michigan, they had a tough start to the season, but we've seen that before, and they tend to build towards the end just like we do. So expect them to be strong, and Ohio State and Indiana again. And it's just a great conference. We really couldn't ask for better preparation for the NCAAs.
And so with IU having been there for the Windermere Cup, there's obviously some familiarity with your team this year inside the Big Ten, but not as much familiarity as you have with the Big Ten. Of course, you rode at Wisconsin. You were a national champion. You were a team captain. You've since been inducted into the Wisconsin Hall of Fame. So for you, as kind of a Badger native, what was it like to get back into this conference as a head coach?
Well, I got to tell you, I didn't see it coming. But when it happened, I loved being in the Big Ten as a student athlete, and to get to come back to that conference is really special to me. When I was at Wisconsin, we competed with a lot of Washington women on the national team. You talked about the legacy here at Washington, and that was true at Wisconsin as well. So a lot of these women, a lot of these alums here that support our program to this day were teammates of mine on the national team back in the 80s. And to have 2 UWs in the Big Ten, I think is kind of perfect, honestly.
For as long as you've been doing this, Coach, both as a student athlete, as a rower, and then getting into the coach's profession, right before we started the interview, you said you just got off the water. It truly is maybe as much, if not more than any other sport, a way of life for those who do it, isn't it?
Absolutely. We start the day around 6:30 in the morning, and then the second practice is after classes and often ends around 5 or 5:30 at night. So, rowing is a lifestyle sport, truly. And we start training in September, our team does, and the championships don't hit until May, but it really does take that long to prepare a team. There's a fall racing season and a spring racing season, and then a number of our student athletes will go on and compete on national team during the summer.
All right, Coach, I want to finish a little off the beaten path here. I understand your degree was actually in this field, in broadcast journalism, and I know that you've been an Olympic commentator for rowing at multiple Olympics for NBC. So you know kind of both sides of this question and this business. Everybody only focuses on Boys in the Boat because it's the most recent rowing movie that everybody's seen. But is there a rowing movie out there that accurately depicts what real life rowing is actually about?
Well, I gotta hand it to George Clooney. Nobody took the cameras into the boat like he did. That really was a breakthrough, I think, for our sport, for fans to be able to see not only an incredible story that was written by Daniel James Brown, but also just an opportunity to see how hard it is to see, you're watching it from the shore and it looks so peaceful and beautiful. He took the camera in the boat and he showed the effort and the strain that goes into propelling those boats and making them go as fast as possible. And I think he did a great job. So I'm grateful that they made that film. They took that book and made it into a film. Yeah,
great book, great movie as well. And a great conversation with Yas Farooq. Coach, great to meet you. Really appreciate your time. We wish you and the team the best of luck in your inaugural trip to the Big Ten Rowing Championships this coming weekend.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Back on Big Ten Today with a look at some of the notable incoming transfers. You will see these players on Big Ten basketball courts this season. Guys like Donovan Dent, legit score from New Mexico, now with Mick Cronin and UCLA. And, of course, you see some of those Big Ten to Big Ten transfers like Wesley Yates from USC to Washington. Rodney Rice, who was so good as part of that Crab Five, will now play for Eric Musselman at USC. Marez Johnson, a guy who was really coming into his own at Illinois, now at Michigan. And how about a familiar name coming back to the Big Ten? Pharrell Payne was at Minnesota, then went to Texas A&M, and now that Buzz Williams leaves College Station to go to College Park, Pharrell Payne is with him. Andy Katz is back with us. Listen, it's the nature of the business, but right now, Andy, if you are not paying attention on a daily basis, you have no idea what your favorite team's roster is going to look like.
Well, I get a lot of flack when I'm made to do these power rankings right after the Final Four. We don't know the rosters. Even now, it's still in flux with still players can still find a spot if they're still out there or withdraw from the NBA draft. So it's a new era. Roster management is sort of the catchphrase, not just in men's and women's basketball, it's certainly in football. But there's a lot of significant names. We talked about earlier in the show, players that are going to be in the first round of the NBA draft that were new to the Big Ten just in 1 year. And I think we'll have some of those names on this board as well in 2026.
Before we get into some of those names, do you think that coaches are okay with the dates right now? There's a lot of talk in football that they want to change the dates of when the portal is open because of how it conflicts or coincides with spring ball. I mean, this seems like a window that never really closes right now in college basketball.
So I'm glad you asked that because last year it was brutal because it was right after Selection Sunday. Yeah. And I remember covering Illinois in Boston at the East Regional, and Brad Underwood comes out for their shoot-around before he's playing UConn, and he goes, yeah, I was just on the phone dealing with transfers. You get a chance to go to the Final Four, and you're dealing with the portal. Now they at least moved it to the Monday before the Sweet 16, so they gave them at least another week. The problem I'm hearing is for all the schools that either didn't make the postseason or were eliminated, their rebuttal is, well, why should we wait?
You're waiting
2 more weeks for the season to end with the Final Four. So that's the push and pull. I'd like it to see maybe just 1 more week. Maybe you just push it to the Final Four, and then you got 4 teams left. If they have to deal with it, so be it. But right now, it's at least the week before.
And it's never going to be perfect. You're never going to make every team happy. That's just the fact of the matter, and that's the case with football as well. Okay, let's dive into some of these transfers specifically, and I want to start with the guy that I mentioned first when we saw that list, Donovan Dent. Big Ten fans may not be familiar because he spent time in New Mexico. He's a pure bucket getter, and I think the kind of guy that Mick Cronin needs on a team that has an identity of being defense first, but you got to score the basketball to win.
Yeah, think about when they had their great success early in Mick Cronin's UCLA career. They had Tiger Campbell, and he was sort of the anchor for that Bruin team. I love Donovan Dent. I think all Big Ten fans that watch our network will fall in love with him as well. He's a scorer. I mean, plays with great attitude and passion. He beat UCLA. That was a big win for New Mexico last season. He's from Southern California. They didn't recruit him initially because they had Tiger Campbell, and now he's coming back. And I think he's an NBA-type player, so a huge, huge plus for Mick Cronin to get him. What was interesting is, so you get Donovan Dent, a proven commodity. And then after losing a Mara to Michigan, by the way, they went and got Xavier Booker. I don't know. I'm going to just wait and see how it all works out. But it is interesting because Booker, for whatever reason, he didn't mesh with Tom Izzo, couldn't get on the floor. And now you're going to go to play for Mick Cronin, who's even more intense than Tom Izzo. So I'm curious how those buttons will be pushed by Mick Cronin that maybe weren't pushed by Tom Izzo.
You could probably insert any name there. Mick Cronin more intense than insert pretty much anybody you want, and you are likely accurate. Fascinating story in Iowa City, not just because Fran McCaffrey's out and Ben McCollum is in, but you have 2 guys who coach polar opposite styles of basketball. So obviously, you know that means a ton of changes for the last year's roster for Iowa and also a ton of work for Ben McCollum in the transfer portal.
Yeah, look, I mean, every possession is going to matter. They're going to defend. It's not going to be in the 80s or 90s. But look, he wins. He won national championships at Northwest Missouri State. He gets Drake the Valley Championship, gets him the NCAA tournament. He had the Player of the Year in Bennett Sturts. Now, what's going to be interesting here, he's taken 5 Drake players with him. He took 4 from Northwest Missouri, including the Player of the Year in the Valley last year, Bennett Sturts. Now, will he be the Player of the Year or player, a Big Ten player in the Big Ten at Iowa? Does it work at each level? That's what we'll have to wait and see.
It can, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yes. So, basketball's basketball. He was successful D2, now D1, but now he's stepping up in D1. We'll see if it can play that way.
And I know for a lot of people this was kind of a home run, no-nonsense hire because of his ties to the state. I'm always fascinated, though, when you change styles so dramatically from one coach to another. The transfer portal helps. Be interested to see what the fan base thinks, at least at the start. If you win, obviously they don't really care what style you play. If you go with a win-loss record that's not quite as exciting, with a slower style of play, that's when the fan base starts to get a little bit like those Todd Licklider vibes. I'm not making those comparisons at all, but they do coach defense first.
Yes, but one other thing is he's from the state.
Yes.
He grew up an Iowa fan, so he's all in on this program. I'm not saying that Fran wasn't, or any previous Iowa coach, but he really sort of has that attachment to the program.
All right, well, attachment, Buzz Williams is a great coach. Attachment's probably not a word that a lot of people tie to Buzz Williams, because he's a little bit of a wanderer. 4 or 5 years at a program, having success. You know what? I'd like to try somewhere else. That's what he's done throughout his career, and yet everywhere he's gone, Andy, he has won. Now he goes from College Station to College Park, and you take over a completely revamped roster. Every member of that Crab Five, the 5 starters from Maryland, gone to either transfer eligibility or the NBA draft. What does that mean for Buzz?
Again, he wins. And, you know, Virginia Tech, Marquette, A&M. It is kind of funny, though, that the 2 of the last 3 coaches that Maryland has hired, because Kevin Willard came from Seton Hall, but 2 of the last 3 came from A&M. Mark Turgeon and Buzz Williams. So we'll see how that plays out. But again, similar to Ben McCollum. I mean, he's got a few A&M guys coming with him, notably Pharrell Payne, Solomon Washington. So, I mean, George Turkson, you know, there are players that had success at A&M that we'll see if it translates. It should, from the SEC to the Big Ten. Payne has gotten better and better since we last saw him in Minnesota. And so I fully expect them to be sort of in the mix right away, somewhere, you know, in that middle group in the Big Ten with a chance to go higher, which, I'll be honest, when I was in Seattle covering Maryland and all the buzz was about Willard potentially leaving for Villanova, there was a legit fear with the Maryland administration, with no AD at the time. David Evans had already left for SMU, that the program was going to completely collapse and they were going to start from zero. Now, they're starting kind of like that way with the roster, but not with the talent.
Yeah, not with the head coach that's won in all those different places when he's had to do similar things. I understand the transfer portal wasn't quite the transfer portal when he was at some of those previous stops, but here's a guy that doesn't mind change. He actually embraces it. That obviously is great news for Maryland. Now, Danny Sprinkle had a tough first year. We expected Washington to have a tough first year. He steps in and had to completely revamp his roster last year. But they've done an unbelievable job in the portal this year, he and his staff, and perhaps the crown jewel is to get Wesley Yates, one of the rising young stars in this league, back to Seattle.
Yeah, actually, way back in December on BTN, I did that USC-Washington game, and Yates had a great game on that floor. They get him. They also pick up, I thought, a very intriguing Big Ten to Big Ten pickup in Lathan Somerville, who, you know, was sort of scratched his potential barely at Rutgers. He could be a solid big for Washington. Also getting Tucker from Indiana, another forward. So this is going to be a revamped roster. They feel pretty good about their incoming freshman class. So I think it's going to be an intriguing look for the Huskies. Yates is a big-time scorer, and so there's no question right off the bat that Washington should not have those scoring droughts that they had a year ago.
Now, there are some coaches, too, specifically, and Matt Painter and Tom Izzo, who have used the portal much less than any other coach inside the Big Ten. Now, there have been some notable exceptions. Lance Jones at Purdue, Tyson Walker at Michigan State. But Tom Izzo also, after telling me a year ago at the Big Ten Summit, maybe I'm too stubborn to change, is a guy who adapts each and every year. You don't win as many games, become the winningest Big Ten coach of all time, win the league last year by 3 full games when nobody expected it, without being willing to adapt. So what's the latest in East Lansing?
So they get Caleb Glenn from FAU, and they got Trey Fort from Samford. Now, Samford is a team that can score. FAU has always consistently scored, and they're hoping that those two will be players that can sort of fill some spots. You know, originally they did not anticipate losing Richardson or Holloman. I mean, you know, the portal works both ways. That was a surprise for them to lose Trey Holloman. Because, you know, he lost his starting spot to Jeremy Fears, but there was anticipation that he was going to come back and be an important piece. He leaves, gets the shot to beat Maryland, but I think getting Cohen Carr back, that was pretty significant and a bit of a surprise, because he certainly could have tried.
Right, the Xavier Booker move, I think that didn't surprise anybody.
No.
Everybody knew that was coming, but all eyes were on Cohen Carr because not just a transfer portal, but a guy like that who's very marketable in the NIL world. I mean, there was a lot of talk that teams out there were going to offer Cohen Carr a ton of money.
And they've got sort of their collection of bigs back for the most part. So, it's going to be another team that I think we don't know who the star will be. I mean, Carr is a highlight. Will he be the scoring star? We'll wait and see the way Richardson became that. I mean, Akins, he had a solid career, but, he never really broke out where he was the big-time star that I think they anticipated. So we'll see. But I think they're going to be a roster that's going to be right there near the top of the Big Ten.
And they're probably going to win a lot of games.
Yes.
I mean, remember last year, even with Jace Richardson's ascendance late in the year, they didn't have a player on the All Big Ten first or second team last year. They were only the second team, I believe, in some 35 years to do that. And as I mentioned, they won the league by 3 full games. All right, we got to let Andy Katz go. He's got to get down the road. More combine work for my friend. Always good to see you.
All right, thanks.
In celebration of Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, the Big Ten Network honors legendary figures in the conference's rich history. An anchor in the back row, Tamari Miyashiro left an illustrious legacy with Washington Volleyball. The Okinawan American libero made 3 first-team All-Pac-10 teams and was named Defensive Player of the Year twice by Volleyball Magazine. She finished her Husky career as the all-time digs leader, recording 2,382 digs. After her career at Washington, she continued playing professionally with Team USA, winning Olympic silver in 2012 before joining the U.S. national team as an assistant coach to win gold at the 2020 Olympics.
Time for us to take you around the Big Ten, where Illinois head football coach Brett Bielema has signed an extension designed to keep him in Champaign throughout the 2030 season. This coming on the heels of a historically successful season in Champaign. Bielema's annual salary will now increase to $7.7 million per year. Take a look at the up-to-the-minute Big Ten baseball standings. Iowa with a 1-game lead over UCLA heading into the final weekend of the regular season. The math tells us that Oregon is still in the mix to potentially factor in the Big Ten championship race as well. USC at 17-10 is projected, along with the top 3 teams, to be part of this year's NCAA baseball field. Coming up Thursday, we have a doubleheader of baseball for you here on the Big Ten Network. We start at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific as the aforementioned number 15 UCLA Bruins host Northwestern. Nightcap will be South Carolina or USC and Washington. That's a Big Ten baseball doubleheader here on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app Thursday night. Big Ten has a large presence of the NCAA Women's Golf Championships. You see 7 different teams making NCAA finals, including UCLA, the NCAA runner-up a year ago, Oregon, which won its regional, and Ohio State set to make its first appearance since 2018. What a great year it's been for UCLA spring sports. Bruins upset Ohio State in men's tennis to win the Big Ten Conference Championship, and they're still playing in the NCAAs. Up next, Billy Martin's team will take on Texas in the quarterfinals. And the women's tournament bracket has also reached the quarterfinal stage. You see Michigan toward the bottom of the bracket, still alive as the Wolverines get set to take on Oklahoma State in the quarters. Michigan hoping to move on into the semis. Big Ten Outdoor Track and Field Championship coverage comes your way here on the Big Ten Network. We have you covered from start to finish with one of the busiest events of the year. It comes your way at 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific on Sunday. That's only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. And that'll wrap up this edition of Big Ten Today. For Andy Katz and our guests, Yasmin Farooq and Jordan Woolery, I'm Rick Pizzo. As always, we appreciate the hang here on Big Ten Today.